Hi, my name is Chris McAllister. Welcome to the SiteShift Podcast. If you've ever found yourself in that tense place of leadership where big goals collide with deep conviction, there's an old word for that. It's called wilderness. And when you're in the wilderness, in the uncertainty, you're in a beautiful place because that's where you can find ancient wisdom. For ambitious, faith-driven leaders, I want you to know there's a way forward and you're not a bad leader to be where you are. We're going to help you in this podcast take all of those moments and use them to make culture your edge in your team, in your organization, in your family. Welcome, everybody, to the SiteShift Podcast. I love introducing you to people that I've been impacted by, who have imprinted on me in some way. And two guests today at the same time. That's a first for the SiteShift Podcast. And we'll talk about why we're doing that in a minute. But first, I want to introduce you to these guys and let you meet them. Owen and Devin, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. So glad you're here. Devin, if you want to go first, tell us name and role and maybe what you're passionate about in leadership.
Well, thanks for having us, Chris. My name is Devin Stein. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources at Miles-McClellan Construction. I've been here almost 5 years in that role. And then I would say my passion about leadership is just how we can align the strategic goals of the organization with the power of the people in it, and how we leverage that internal resource and make those people better at what they want to do and what they're experts at. And just really, I think leadership skill setting just brings that to the forefront.
I love that. That's so awesome. This just stands out to me as a curiosity. What's one of your favorite moments that would just come to mind where you've seen the power of HR being at its best?
I think there's two fronts to HR. It's the business side outcomes. So how you can see someone personally develop in their career and, the strength that brings to the organization, whether that's through client profit, productivity, whatever that looks like. So I think that's a really cool aspect to just see someone grow themselves. And then I think the very nature of human resources, the human aspect of it, how you have that touch point with people and you can really impact their personal life outside of just the everyday business is a special part, I think, inherent in that role.
Oh, I love that. Awesome. Awesome. Owen, introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
As Devin mentioned, Chris, thank you for having me again. I'm Owen Wyss. I am the CFO of Miles-McClellan Construction. I've been here about just under 3 years. Been in construction around 10 now. Passionate about in leadership. I think at first for me, it always comes to personal. I'm someone who desires to continue to grow and learn. And so that's where it really all started. And then that kind of transitioned into wanting to do the same thing for the team around me. I've been building the team here for 3 years now, and I guess they're starting to look a little bit more like me. They're hungry. I love it every day. And it's special to come into the office and get to work with a team that is same thought. They want to learn and grow and someday aspire to, C-suite level chairs. And that's awesome to be a part of.
I love that. We were joking about this before we hit record. Both of you are hungry to grow and learn and impact others. And clearly, Owen, that's stood out to me in our years of knowing each other because we figured this out before we hit record. You currently are the reigning champ as a third invitee on the podcast. So we need to get a SiteShift wrestling belt.
I must be doing something right.
Oh, that's so fun. So fun. Well, as we dive into today's episode, the current leadership context, there's just so much uncertainty in business and so much uncertainty in the world. Not even that you guys would have any thoughts on this, but would love to start here. In what ways are you seeing the uncertainty of the context at large play into your leadership roles? And Owen, if you want to go first, when you think about just, businesses like as much certainty as possible and everything feels so up in the air. I was with a renewables company yesterday and they were talking about all the tariffs and how all that's changing things. So Owen, when you think about the context of the world at large, how does that translate into your role at Miles-McClellan?
Yeah, you're right. We're experiencing it right now. We came into 2025 with real high hopes and lofty goals, and just with the volatility around us and the private work kind of drying up, we're not having a great year. And so it is. I don't want to say we're not having a great year. We're being impacted. It's still a great year. We're growing, but we're being impacted, and you feel that in the leadership room every day as we try to um, as we try to wrestle with that and how we're going to communicate it and deal with it, and keeping a positive upbeat that we're continuing to grow but yet just not achieving goals, and that's tough to deal with. But as a team, we are tight knit and we've got trust in each other, and so we're just we're able to nobody's micromanaging the situation. We all believe in each other. We're all aligned. And I think that that's helping us get through and also concentrate on the positives of we've got a great 26, 27, and 28 lined up. And that this is just a little blip in the radar.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a moment that's happening that no doubt will pass, but at the same time, we still got to face that reality.
Yep.
Devin, how are you seeing this translate maybe into the way that individual leaders are showing up to lead their teams? Is there any nervousness they have, or do you feel like in the Miles-McClellan context, they're able to really find a sense of peace in the midst of that chaos?
Well, I think touching on what Owen said, I definitely feel that, in the business, we know this year is a little of a different performance year for us. And we do feel that stress as we're looking at, what projects are out there to bid and the competitiveness of those bids and just kind of where that's falling in our year. I think it's balanced with looking ahead. We have really strong backlog going forward. So we know this is not, a permanent level of uncomfort. It's just kind of a temporary confluence of external factors. But you feel it in, I think, a little bit of morale. There's a little bit higher stress of pursuing, more strongly this year to hit our goals, re-strategizing or reforecasting what those initial goals were. So at the, manager level, I think it's really a balance of how you acknowledge the situation, but still keep people motivated and keep people engaged, and kind of how you started it with uncertainty. Businesses certainly like certainty, but so do people. People don't like that, alternate situation. So you don't know what people are coming from home with either, of like how they're dealing with it or the impacts that have happened to them personally. So I think it's constantly just keeping that human element and that touch of how people are dealing with it, and making sure that you're able to motivate them to see the line of sight of what we're working towards.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you guys clearly value people, their whole lives, them having the opportunity to grow and develop. And for context for the listeners, um, whenever this episode comes out, episodes back, we had an interview with the CEO of Miles-McClellan, Matt, and he doesn't live what we see sometimes with a CEO who says, "Hey, I don't care about people growing. Devin, that's your job." That's not who Matt is. What would you say to a CEO listening to this that says, I should just outsource the vision and the concern of people and their development to HR? I don't have to worry about it.
Well, I think something that you feel from Matt instantly is he's incredibly passionate about the business, about what truly our mission statement means of building leaders and building relationships. I think he really lives that every day, and he really, truly, that's an authentic statement for him. So then, the rest of the team, including myself, builds off from there. So we're building leadership authentically because it really does matter to us and how our business is run. So I think if you are someone who's sitting in that role and maybe that's not your comfort level, or you're looking to maybe let someone else drive that, I would go back to what is your overall business goal, because it's going to be tied heavily to that. And people are going to buy in or believe in the direction of the company based on the direction you're setting.
I love that. I had a CEO of a construction company tell me a couple of weeks ago, I'm just not looking anymore at people development as a cost. It's an investment.
Yeah.
And it's the critical function for what's next for us as an organization. Because at the end of the day, so much about construction is the management of the project, keeping everything from an operational standpoint as buttoned up as possible. But what's that differential going to be? It's going to be people. So you guys already had, no environment's perfect, no culture's perfect, but you guys already had a good culture, a culture with momentum. You had a good environment. And obviously, of course, you get in there and you dig in, you're going to find problems. No perfect place exists. How would you guys describe, what you wanted to see get better or improve before engaging SightShift? And Owen, you go first if you want. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess for me, I think I immediately go to, at the time I was the new team member, and I had a history with you, Chris, which was awesome, which was an awesome opportunity. And I was a new team member on a team that had one who was nearing retirement. Devin's not, as you heard earlier, Devin's right around the 5-year mark. And we're sitting in the room with a group of 20 to 25 to 30-year experienced individuals at Miles-McClellan. And so the room was obviously in a spot of change. And it was really time, I think, that perfectly timed to start working with you to work on our new communication style, because they had just had such a long history of a tight-knit, close group that they knew how each other thought, and the room was changing pretty rapidly. So that's what I think about was number one is sitting down as a team, becoming vulnerable, which allowed us obviously to build the trust, and then have that consistent communication style or verbiage or language to work around. Really brought us, I think it advanced us 5 years of what we would have had to have tried to do on our own.
Oh, that's powerful. I love that way of framing it. A couple more questions on that, and then we'll get to you, Devin. One is, where did we help with that communication style? How would you articulate, what that looked like at the street level in those leadership team meetings?
I mean, I think the easy one, obviously there were moments, and unfortunately I wasn't actually present at this meeting, but I got a chance to listen to it afterwards. But there is a powerful chapter in SightShift. I'm sure, Chris, you'll be able to reference it exactly, but a powerful chapter where in working in a group setting like we do, everybody's asked to share some very vulnerable moments. And I think that obviously is a turning point of when you're seeing every leader around the table willing to get that vulnerable, you understand that, hey, we've got a lot of trust in here, because otherwise no one's going to be willing to share. So that was a very important moment. And then the easy one for me is just talking about proving and hiding. We don't often do it, but obviously, and I hope we've gotten better at it after working with you. But every once in a while, we'll joke about, well, hey, you're proving, or maybe you're hiding a little bit here. And it's great to have that trust, again, going back to that trust level, to have that conversation with each other and not be fearful of retribution, whether that's, with our CEO, Matt, or just at a peer level.
I love that. There was a CEO that said to me a couple months ago, because I asked him, I was like, why us? Why now? And as we were getting ready to kick off, and he said, we're going to get where we want to go, but I want to get there faster. And I love that way of, yeah, we got there 5 years sooner. And that's the thing that I would say to listeners. It would be, you don't have to do violence with this. You don't have to force this. You don't have to pressure this moment. And I think that's the misunderstanding that happens in so much leadership development and training, that you think you've got to push people into these moments. Done right, people open up, and then that formation, that connection, that development deepens. There was a large organization in 2020. We had done a thing, and it was my worst engagement ever, because it was the first time I'd done it by Teams virtually, because that was the world we lived in at that time. I didn't even know how to share like their IFQ data through the screen very well. And I had just done the sauna, and I'm all sweaty, and it was terrible, terrible. But afterward, I mean, this is like 8 presidents of at the time, $30 billion organization. The key person I was connected to in the deliverable, she was like, we've been trying to get there for years, and we just got there in a few hours. And that's the idea, that people want the right people want this kind of, like you said, tight knit experience. Um, and so with that acceleration and with that place that you're at now and that tight knit connection, what do you think is the most important thing to keep in view for the leadership team, Owen, that's going to keep that tight knit relationship now that's in place, developing and deepening?
Authenticity of communication,
Mm.
not being afraid to say what you're thinking at the time you're thinking it. Now, of course, if there's an element of proving or hiding, taking a step back, a moment away, and settling into that moment is always a good idea. But just being authentic and being willing to share, how you're feeling, even if it's different from the group. We talk about that. We often may not walk out of the room with every arrow pointing in the same direction on a decision. But that's not what we're going to display. We're not going to back talk a decision to our team after it's been made. We all get on board, even if we were a dissenter at the time.
I love that. Devin, for you, how would you describe like the moment in time before we worked with you guys that you wanted to see improve or transform? And then what did that improving or transforming look like? How did SiteShift help with that?
Yeah. So, Owen touched on our specific executive team dynamic and definitely a shift I saw there, which was super helpful for me being relatively new to that team and being able to feel really comfortable at adding value and being present. But broader strokes, we were at a point in our organization where we were growing pretty rapidly. We had a lot of, for lack of a better word, like old guard leadership in place for a long time that had helped us to get to that growth standpoint. So it was definitely strong leadership, but we had a new group of leaders kind of building and hovering that were ready to take that next step. And we were challenged with how do we, get them there? How do we collectively bring them forward as leaders? And not just like with a managerial skill set, but with true leadership skills where they're thinking strategically, they're aligned with the organization, and also like helping us to bring our culture forward as we continue to grow. Because that was a very much a concern at the time of we've been this small family feel, we've maintained this size and have had these touch points for a very long time. Now we're growing rapidly. How do we keep that strong piece of our culture that we think really helps us differentiate? So those were two things we were really focusing on. I personally, when I was looking at leadership, I wasn't just looking for like here's 10 classes we're going to go through, and at the end of it, you're going to, communicate this way with your team or, manage conflict this way. That was not the approach I was looking for. And we do have tools that we've utilized in that capacity, but I was looking for a much broader impact that we could.
Thank you. Because, Owen kind of already knew it, and then you were coming in and learning it, in those initial conversations we had before we kicked off. Was there any kind of moment or piece that we spoke to or anything like that, and it may be something Owen said, that you gained a greater confidence, like, I think SiteShift's who we need to go forward with?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Owen gave great personal testimonial and, just feeling very validated in the leader that he was already in the organization. That definitely spoke volumes about the program itself. It just also was a very different from start of the conversation about what your program is, how you develop it, how you work with us. It was a completely different approach than many other, external programs that I have either experienced myself or we were vetting at the time. It felt very much like you would be elevating Miles-McClellan through your system and not we were inputting some external system into Miles-McClellan and then having to adapt to it.
I love that. Yeah, we're not telling you who to be. We're helping you be your best you as an organization and individuals. I'll tell you, it was a powerful experience for me, Devin, and I'd love to just let this encourage any other HR leaders out there. So when we went to the next level and we were working with a lot of the project managers, the first one of those sessions, and I'm going to tell a crazy story here and I'll protect the innocent just to let people know it's not all easy path, roses and daisies. But the first one I went into to work with the project managers, Matt, the CEO, was there. So he's in the room and he kicks it off. And he hangs around for like 5 minutes and then he leaves. And I was like, it's just me here. Like you weren't there in the room, and I put this in air quotes, not that you would bring this at all, but sometimes we see this policing, right? Uh, and so, what was something that allowed you to give so much trust to us to literally have no leadership above them in the room? It's just us and these project managers.
Well, I think the real differentiator with SiteShift in general is it's not just like a set of tools, it is a mindset shift. So you as the individual, it's really about your leadership journey and yourself at first, and then how you're able to translate that to, your teams, to your organization. So for me, just going through it and really feeling that powerful difference and seeing difference in our team, um, I knew that it was not going to be where everyone was ready. Like everyone in that room was not going to maybe be immediately ready, engaged, understanding the journey. It takes a little time, it takes work, and people are at different places in and readiness for that. So I really step back because I know if you're ready to do the work and be there and be present, it'll come to you and it'll mean something specific to you. And I wanted to give the space and freedom for people to feel that and not feel like, hey, this is how you should be experiencing it. And this is what you should expect. And this is what we're hoping, after day one, you're feeling and putting into play. It really was about, them going on that journey with you guys leading that.
And if I could add, I think too, and maybe this has already been said, but just to reiterate, we never worried that you were going to do anything to change the Miles-McClellan culture. SiteShift has its own culture, but you were doing everything to continue to expand and build our culture and making SiteShift a part of our culture as opposed to changing our culture or destroying our culture. And when you've got that kind of comfort, not surprised at all that Matt walked out of the room so that, the room could be honest and open without a leader in it, like what Devin just mentioned.
That's powerful. So to encourage people listening, that's such a mature place to be in, Devin, to be like, not everybody's going to move at the same pace. They need their own space to process this. That maturity isn't always present from a leader in your position because they have their own anxiety. They're reading into it. And so because of that, out of that insecurity, everybody has to experience this the same way at the same pace, and I love the way you framed that. And just to validate the results on that, I'll never forget this because, just in years and years of working with over hundreds of organizations and teams, you just have some experiences that stand out really strong. And so, we had two meetings, and this is with the next layer of the organization for those listening. And we had just amazing feedback, and you guys had it all recorded because we were putting it out there also for the virtual team members. And so you can hear people like say these things like, okay, I'm learning about my insecurities, where I'm proving or hiding, and I'm not powering up with my team anymore. And I'm not just forcing things through. One guy I remember saying like, in the initial piece, they're just figuring out their mindset and their identity fears. And they're either blown away by it or it makes sense by the end of that first session. But by the second session, one guy had said like, my blood pressure's lower. And my wife is like, what are you doing? And I'm relating to my kids better. So all that to say, we had this momentum. So third meeting, I'm letting everybody kind of chime in from where we were at the last session and the content. And I can't remember exact numbers, but it was about 30 people. Okay. So we had in the room before I went to the virtual and let them participate, but we had 28 people just saying positive things that had happened in transformation. And this is to help organizations out there just know it's not all perfect, and that's okay. So person 29, here's what he says. I don't have anything. I don't understand what you're teaching. I don't get the points you're making. All of this feels like a waste of time. I'm just here to do my job, and I just want to go home and be done, and I don't get the point of this. And It was an amazing moment because it was so honest.
Mhm.
He had space to bring what he thought and felt, even though 27 people before him or 28 people before him, whatever it was, had said these positive things. He didn't feel like he had to play into the groupthink. Now, I do think in a maturing standpoint, there was a way he could have processed that that would have been more curious. And that's okay though,
Yeah.
because we're not threatened by that. And so I remember just saying, "Hey, thank you. That's so honest, and I appreciate that. And can we interact around this some?" And I asked him a question, and I was like, would there be people in your life personally that would like to see you improve on something? And what would that be?
Mhm.
And he vulnerably stepped into that moment, and he was just like, yeah, my personal relationships would wish that I wouldn't dismiss their feelings as much. And it was an awesome moment because I remember saying back right after that, and I was being facetious. Oh, that's weird because I would have never guessed you would be that way from our interaction just now. And this is always a little bit risky, but he laughed, the whole room fell out. And I, not knowing anything about where he is today, but at least the door cracked open even a quarter inch. And that's what's so powerful about that mature aspect that you were bringing to it. It's like everybody's going to be on their own journey with this and they're going to bring their own pace to this. Devin, what do you do? Because I think, and I don't mean to overgeneralize this or be reductionistic, but in our work with organizations, so much of HR's influence in the outer realms of it, right? The conferences and those kind of things can be so much about playing not to lose. There's elements of wanting to develop people, but 51% of that energy or greater very often is like, don't get sued. How do you cultivate within yourself that visionary capacity to stay focused more on how people grow and develop?
Well, I think some of it is that Matt gives all of our like leadership roles a lot of autonomy and a lot of trust to expand and define, what that role means for the organization. Definitely with boundaries, and we're a very close team, as Owen said, so we talk through a lot of things. But I think it starts there. Number one, you're not playing from a defensive mindset from the get-go. Or having to defend constantly, what
Mm.
your thought process or strategic comment is about. Um, and I do have to know, I do mention law and compliance
Of
and
course,
things like
have
that
to.
in the
Yeah,
room. So
have to.
that is always an issue. But I do think like there's a gray area there of you can't let that hold you back or define you, or there is an element of being able to like push the boundaries a little bit to advance the organization. And I really, part of my role, that's my favorite piece, is aligning with the strategic elements of the organization that don't have to do with specifically what's in HR. So I think like being able to utilize our people, who we have great people. We have people who are committed to Miles-McClellan, who love the business, who love working for us. And so if I can just make their job easier and give them the ability to grow within the organization, I just think it creates a bigger impact overall.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, and somebody does have to not let them burn it all down.
Yeah, yeah.
And absolutely
There
that
is an
presence.
element of that,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, that presence has to be there for sure. And the sad part is when that presence becomes the dominating presence, then we move out of fear, right?
Mhm.
Rather out of that best mindset. So perfectly stated. Owen, for you, you know, I think a CFO in its best expression, it is that visionary capacity of being able to see the way forward and move the parts and pieces into place so that we can see this greater vision occur. Um, when you think about like how you keep that visionary capacity alive within yourself, how do you, if you were talking to like a room of CFOs, how would you encourage them that they actually can have a significant impact on shaping and improving the culture of an organization?
I'd probably say something like think 5 years forward, not about this year.
Mhm.
If we're making decisions around, some minor budget changes this year, without thinking about impacts to the future or how it might hinder growth or hold us back, I think that's a giant mistake. And I think it is, I think it is common in the industry, or common amongst people in my role, where now I will admit I'm more risk adverse than the rest of the leadership room. I tend to be more challenging and questioning, and is this the right move? But I just want to make sure things are well thought through. And I find myself often talking about, this is a decision for now, or is this a decision that's going to be best in 5 years or best for us in 10? And I think with our lofty, I hate to call them lofty, with our growth goals, which are lofty but realistic, if making decisions now that hold us back in 5 years are really going to be detrimental to, I mean, it's not uncommon knowledge that we're heading towards an ESOP transaction. So, making decisions now that hinder us 5 years from now, they don't just hurt our ownership group, they hurt all of us, because we're all going to be owners here shortly. And so it's really keeping that forward thinking mindset, while being realistic about what's happening right in front of you too.
I love that. And I think that's, I mean, part of my excitement for today's episode to get recorded and share it with others is because both of you live in that dynamic tension that your roles provide. So how does Devin protect the organization and advance it? How does Owen protect the organization and advance it? So you've got to have that visionary capacity and challenge things. And I love that way of articulating it. And like you said, you can see how easy it is to look around you in the world you live in professionally. Others that are in that role, they end up losing that visionary capacity because they get scared and they get afraid, and their best mindset isn't at work in that moment. So beautiful. When
Sorry,
you
one more thing, Chris,
yeah,
if I
yeah.
can. I think because Owen and I both spoke to like the risk adverse people in the room. I think we do a lot of work to also make very educated risk decisions, because there's certainly times that the decision or the direction I wanted to go is a learning lesson and not necessarily like a success story. But it's made us better, and it's made us think about things in a different way the next time. And just kind of, I think going back to the leadership structure we have in place, like that's a very like welcome approach. You're not going to be right 100% of the time, and that's okay. It's just like how we're moving forward with that information and growing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you added that. Thank you. When you guys think about like, and for those listening, so what we did with Miles-McClellan, we call it the leadership operating system. It's where we get in there and measure, we start to build a plan, and then we execute the plan through coaching throughout the organization at different layers, and then install an academy so that for people that want to grow and learn, they can just go as far as they want. What for you guys has been a surprising like benefit that from our work together has gone better? Now I'm going to ask the opposite too, because I want to learn. But you reflect back on our time together, the journey we've taken, and you look at it and you go, okay, I wanted this to happen and it did, but this was surprising, and it either went better or just kind of came out of nowhere and was an extra benefit. Whoever wants to go first. Go for it, Devin.
I can jump in.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing, like you mentioned, like this did happen. I definitely saw our more tenured leaders change a little in the dynamic of how they spoke in meetings, what their approach was, how even they may be talking about their people and thinking about their people and that dynamic. So that was definitely a goal, and I do think we saw that. And then speaking to that, like next layer that went through the more broad coaching group, I think that was like our real end goal. It's like that's the group that is really hungry for leadership coaching and advancement and growing and interested in that. And so I think one thing I saw was really some people come out of that with really embracing the information, maybe not always 100% getting each piece right when they're going through it in that coaching session, but really thinking about it and taking it in and then applying it down the road and applying it to how they're taking on maybe a new role as a manager, a new role as a leader. So that has been a really exciting aspect. And then speaking to that, rolling out the academy piece, getting the interest and follow-up questions of like, hey, when's this other piece going to be available? How are we continuing this structure in the organization? So really feeling that there was some buy-in and some desire for people to like be able to continue to grow in that capacity.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So people were asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
What's an example, obviously protecting the innocent as specific as possible, where someone came out of that second layer training and there was an improvement or a shift?
I mean, I have seen it with managers that I've coached just in maybe like people issues or just seeing their thought process come through differently instead of immediately reacting and going to this layer. And really like taking a step, talking through, or not immediately giving the answer right away and like digging that person out. Something we talked a lot about was allowing people to like share the burden or the weight of the burden so they can grow. And I think that has been a huge shift in a lot of our team members of realizing like, hey, we love sometimes getting in the weeds and doing that and making sure that it's a success, but sometimes the greater success is letting the next person down do that for you.
That's awesome. I love that. I wasn't even aware. I happened to get CC'd on a communication about a week or so ago where in the North Carolina office, somebody was like, hey, we need a bunch of IFQs. And which showed like, oh, they're hungry to understand each other. They want
Yep.
to become aware. They want to hold up that mirror. They want to serve them. And that's awesome. Oh, and what about for you would be something that was a standout that you didn't expect?
I think first and foremost, there's probably a personal a note. I didn't realize how impactful going through the content a second time would be. There were parts of it that I believe I felt good about having implemented. There were some things that I, kind of implemented right before we went through it a second time. And then, then going through it a second time, just how much I realized I had missed. And I hate, that's on me personally, but just how much more opportunity there was. I'd already focused on some of it. Now it's time to start focusing on other parts of it. For the room, as I mentioned earlier, it advanced us at least 5 years in our ability to communicate as a team. And with a room that was turning over, that was very important. And then I think a third item would probably be it did allow us to take a step back and really start. And I think we'd done a good job of this in the past based on what had been told to me. But it was an amazing opportunity to take a step back again and really ask the right butts, right seats question, and from a culture standpoint. And so, we did have some things that changed in our leadership and for the positive moving forward. But I think it advanced those discussions too that could have lingered for a few years.
Wow, I love that. I love that. Now, I want to go to the other direction because we can always get better, right? We can always learn. And from the vantage point of your leadership positions, this is super interesting to me. And, I'm not ideologically sensitive or allergic and don't mind it even being on the recording, but be gentle. No. If you could wave a magic wand and say, hey, if you guys could improve this or get better at this, this would be really helpful. What comes to mind, Devin, if anything?
I think on the front end for us, and granted, we have a lot of engineers in the room and not broadly categorizing, but a lot of men in our organization. And so like when you're talking about the vulnerability and the self-assessment and self-realizing, that definitely isn't the expectation when they're stepping into a leadership training or leadership framework, if you will. So I think for me, a learning point on the front end was really being able to more clearly explain, here's the process, outlining what it means, not just like, here's a leadership operating system, like really like explain, like, here's some of the things you can expect to have to put work into and go through, but here's the outcome you could also expect to have. So I think, we had to do a little bit of work at buy-in in those first few sessions because they were kind of like, what the heck have you signed us up for, Devin? But like just if I had maybe done a little bit more on that front end to have a little more trust in that process, So that for me, and then also that translates down to that next group of being really clear with them about like, hey, the what's in it for me factor of like, this is what you're going to go through. It is not probably your typical what you've been used to in external leadership trainings, but this is what you could come out with and how this can help you evolve.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Awesome. Well, that's really encouraging because we did late 2024 re-engineer the way we kick off to get that super tight. And so very affirming. And I want to encourage you guys because, you faced a decision point that a lot of organizations face as that next tier rolls out. Is it elective or is it required? And we see best practices and we walk through that moment with you guys. And to see the way that y'all embraced it, to say, hey, let's require it and then let it be elective after that. So it should capture them in a way that most keep returning. And it was really cool to see that happen. And I love that because that's the spirit of what I heard from you guys, which is we want to give everybody a chance to grow as much as they want. And what organizations don't realize is everyone's evaluating leadership through a temperamental model. And what I mean by that is they evaluate leaders by what they value, right? So if they're very extroverted, low on data, high on intuition, then they look at other leaders who are like that or more charismatic and they're like, that person's going to be a great leader one day. And if they're more data focused and less expressive in their emotional affect, then they'll tend to select those kinds of people for, that'll be a great leader one day. And what we're trying to do is say, no, there's a template. When a leader is secure in who they are, they'll be clear in what they do, and they'll build healthy community and culture. And you never know for sure until you expose everyone. There are going to be people that surprise you and self-select and go, I'll be one. This is just to encourage everybody out there listening. This was one of the things that happened for us in 2015 that really helped us catch wind as an organization. There was a company we were working with in another state, and we were working with that second tier, larger group. And I didn't know this, but there was a person who was going to be fired and went through the coaching and just decided to be that person. It's a lot like the story here in Columbus, Ohio with Cameron Mitchell, where he said, I went to work and I was the worst employee in the restaurant that day. And I decided to come back the next day and be the best employee. Like that mindset. And of course, now they've built the large restaurant business that they have. And so she made that same decision. And so she became Employee of the Year. And then we ended up working with that organization for years as they headed off to a sale to a public corporation. And so, for those that are listening, it's just don't count people out. Give them the opportunity because you never know who's going to surprise you. So glad that stood out. Oh, and what about for you? You from your viewpoint, where would you go? Hey, if this could tighten up or if this could be wholesale improved, wherever it takes you.
Simply going to say one more exercise. And I'm referencing the exercises we were normally responsible to complete ahead of a chapter. And it's a very specific exercise and maybe then followed by 4 meetings. I don't know. But the exercise being immediately take one individual through the class or I should say through the content. I'll admit I still have not done it. And it's me hiding. I fear I can't do it as well as you do it, but I want them to have that same experience. And, if we had that one last exercise of take someone through it, maybe, looking at that PM group where I believe they had 4, you did it in a series of 4 meetings. If we were taking them through the content at that time, and then meeting as a team to talk about our experiences, what we could do better, what the content we should go over with them before or after the next meeting, would have forced us to do it. And I have not done it yet. And I really would like to, and it's going to be a 2026 goal to get at least 2 of my team members through the content. But just that little extra, we were always, I thought as a team, we were always really good at coming prepared, even if some of us did procrastinate and only prepare the hour before each meeting. It's just, if there would have been one more and we were going to meet to go over it, it would have forced us all to do it.
I love that. I'm going to capture that because it's a great way to do that. And what's powerful about what you guys have with the academy is, um, you don't have to be the teacher. You are qualified to teach in the sense that you've walked through it, but like they can watch the video and read the chapter, and then you're just having a conversation with them. And well, I'll carry the load with you, my man. I'll carry the load with you.
You're such a great storyteller, Chris, and that's
mm,
that's the hard thing, is to put things into context as well as you do.
Oh, that's encouraging. I'll encourage you and listeners with this, and Owen knows the story because I think I told this to you years back when we first worked together. The first time I ever presented publicly, I asked a buddy. I was like, "Hey, man, how was it?" This was in college, and he goes, "Maybe you could have made it more interesting," which is like the most politically correct way of saying you were boring, and and I knew I wanted to develop the ability to tell a story well, so I went. This is a true story. This is crazy. I went to the speech communications, head of the department, the professor, and I said, I'd like for you to teach a class on storytelling. So it's not even in the catalog. It didn't exist. I really want to develop that skill. And, I'd like it to count towards my minor, which was speech communications. And he said, I tell you what, if you can find 6 other people to take the course, I'll teach it. And so I did it. I went and found 6 people, and the whole class was us just telling stories and getting critiqued by him.
Wow.
And it was a super fun experience. So maybe that encourages people for wherever skill they want to build. You can start at the bottom. You can start at the bottom. So as we think about like those that are listening to this and they're in an organization, they would love to see the team or the company make an investment in this kind of transformation and development. I'd love to hear from each of you, like, how would you speak to the pain point they're feeling and putting it in your words, and why they should look at investing and getting better and growing and seeing what's possible? Devin, if you want to go first.
Sure. Well, I think it's a couple of things. One, I wish when I was a 27-year-old kind of leader, emerging leader, I wish I had had some of this introspective thought and would have saved me a lot of the very much proving of the validity of why I'm here and what I'm doing. And I think just being able to go through that now is still super helpful and always something I'm working on, but that would have been a game changer in the way I perceived building out my career. So I think that just for your young leaders will move them leaps and bounds. Secondly, our organizations are built on our people. So if you're not investing in them and giving them the tools, not every tool is going to fit every person or meet them exactly where they are. And I think the like vast education of the leadership operating system was something that was really enticing to us to be able to say, okay, there's elements here that are going to be important to different people at different times, and how they can approach that on their own kind of trajectory was really a versatile tool for us to add. So those 2 things alone, but I really think for us, it's been a huge shift in the way we communicate as an organization, identifying some of our weak points and being able to leverage that to an even stronger culture is something we're still moving through, but it was a huge benefit add, I think, especially to our executive leadership group, that culture piece of it, and being able to identify some of those spots for us to continue to work on. So.
Oh, it's awesome. What I love when an organization invests like you guys do, it was so easy to stand up and say to different leaders in different arenas, hey, Miles-McClellan cares about your whole life. Like they know life isn't easy. And so are there people in the organization that are facing issues with their teenager? What would it be like for them to take this mindset and bring it into parenting? And so in the academy, there's figure that parenting out. And I mean, just all of these ways that them showing up at Miles-McClellan, their whole life can be better. We spend so much time together. Why wouldn't we want to build a culture that improves lives and changes lives? And my wife would love for me to tell you all this. She turned 50 a couple days ago. And I'm just reflecting on just like how fast it all goes. right? And we spend so much time with the people at work. Well, why not have a context where we enjoy each other and get better, even if there are hard moments? I mean, that's part of it. So I love that. Owen, what about for you? How would you speak to their pain point, and then how would you encourage them to invest?
You two both said it so well. I don't know that I can add much, and it depends on what their pain points are. And I mean, and even if there's not pain points, the one thing I probably would highlight is I've been in construction 10 years, but only just shy of 3 at Miles-McClellan, and by far this is the best culture that I've been a part of in a company. And we still went through the culture work with you, and I think at times we kind of had to be reminded there's always room for improvement in culture, even if you have a great culture. And we had to be reminded we have a great culture, but it's something that we need to keep working at. So if you've got a terrible culture, I can't recommend enough looking at SiteShift and its programming. And if you've got a great culture and you don't know what the next step is, same thing. There's opportunity there, and it moves us leaps and bounds.
Honored to hear that, man. I feel like I'm about to come out of my chair, because a project in the making really for about 5 or 6 years becomes real in the next few weeks. Make Culture Your Edge. The new book will be coming out. And it's, I love getting it in a book form because I can help more people. And then they can look at that and go, okay, this isn't a beat down, but we can always get better, because culture drifts every day. And there are all of these things that create these temptations and distractions. So beautifully stated. My friends, thank you for being on the podcast with me. Such an honor to have you. And listeners, I hope you're encouraged as Owen and Devin are in the real throes of leadership, living out the challenges. If leadership were easy, everybody would just say, hey, I'll stick in this for the long game and have the best mindset. But you guys know on the inside, it ain't that easy. So thank you so much, and hope everyone has a fantastic day or week ahead.
Chris.
Thanks so much for being with us on the SightShift podcast. I hope in some way we've encouraged you to face, lean into, and become aware of the moments that represent so much transformation possibility. If you want more, you can always go to SightShift, SIGHT, shift.com, and learn to make culture your edge.